Welcome to the village.
So another issue I'd like to talk about is in today's world, we have such access to so much information, and so do children. So you and I were just discussing a little bit about issues like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, as opposed to obsessive compulsive traits.
Yes.
I've been doing this for 30 years, so I have, I've seen the generations change. And one thing I see with folks that are coming in now is we used to call it labeling theory, so that, you have anxiety. And so you're a child and nobody really intervenes with anxiety, you just correct it or whatever. And I have a woman right now coming in that's 24-ish, and she's convinced she has OCD.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've treated her and she does not have it, but she was told she had OCD.
Yeah.
And so she responds to the label. All these years have acted as if. We have her on some medication through talk therapy. She's not checking the doors anymore. She's not agonizing over different worries of what she calls routines that she had to do. She doesn't have it. So we are going to put in her notes that there's some OCD traits. But traits actually come out of the anxiety that the person is feeling. And if they've been labeled, it meets their cognitive sort of needs. I have OCD, so this is why I do what I do. So it's difficult, as you know, as a pediatrician, that oftentimes it's difficult to diagnose some of these younger kids, but sometimes it does more harm than good.
Giving them a diagnosis and a label.
A label. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Because you can say, well, maybe there's OCD traits here. We don't know if it's a disorder quite yet. Because a lot of anxiety will look like that. Sometimes a child who lives a very anxious life will sort of adapt those behaviors. I sort of like to have people come in with a blank slate.
That's really interesting because one thing can lead to another.
Oh, absolutely.
As opposed to you're doing this because you have this. You now are starting to do this because you're anxious about it.
Yes.
You had mentioned before we started recording, we were kind of chatting a little bit, and you'd actually talked about ADHD in the same regard.
Very much so. And I understand that when a child is young coming to a pediatrician, some of them are going to have those behaviors. And I certainly can understand what I call ruling out certain traits or saying to a parent or a child, in some way, letting them know that there's something going on, but not stopping their hope of ever being, because when children get these labels, they feel different and they act differently, and other people respond to them in such a way that a real negative pattern get going in their life.
And one diagnosis can coexist with another. They think they have ADHD, or they are being told that it's wrong not to pay attention.
Yes.
So now they feel like they're a bad kid. Self-esteem issues, anxiety.
I worked with the loveliest family many, many, many years ago. I think that the child was probably 7-ish, 8, 9 when it was brought. And this is going back to 1990 something. And back then it was done badly. I mean, the doctor had said, oh, he has ADHD. Well, in Jimmy's mind, he became more anxious, but it became kind of like this is it. He felt like he was different. He didn't express it, but he felt like there was something wrong, especially because when he was in school, he would have these issues and he would think that everybody else was doing it a different way, and he was very different. He couldn't do it that way.
Yeah.
It just snowballed. It got so out of hand. And as an adult, I happen to know him, and he's got 2 little babies. He's a very functioning human being, but he has said to me, I thought I was sick back then.
Yeah.
So it was difficult to weed out what was responding to the label. He was depressed. Yes, he was depressed. He'd been told as a little boy he had this thing that made him different than other kids.
And that's a nightmare as a kid. You want to do nothing but fit in.
That's exactly it. And I think he started tripping over himself because he had this label. He felt that he was different, was on the outside looking in, and had a very difficult time. But has grown into be a lovely human being.
Good.
But he remembers the struggle.
So recognizing there's some people who it's hard for them as a child, but as they grow into an adult, they might recognize some of these things and they might seek out some counseling or therapy or hobbies or something that makes them feel better about themselves. But not all adults will do that. Sometimes it's, I don't want to say too late, but the damage is done to a person that doesn't may not want to change because it takes motivation.
Well, also, I'm not familiar with your childhood, but my childhood was very normal in the sense I played outside. We didn't
We
have
played
computers.
outside.
We had phones. We had house phones only.
Yes.
So my parents knew who all my friends were.
Yeah.
And we lived in a neighborhood that all the parents knew the kids and watched them walking to school and what have you. But it was a very normal kind of stuff. And I think about, what kind of person would I be if I didn't have that? What kind of person would I be if I didn't develop with healthy people in my life? And so many of these kids don't have that. And again, I'm not blaming.
Yeah.
I'm understanding that we all come to the table with something.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'll give you a little glimpse into my childhood quick. And I'm thinking because my parents were both very involved, very loving. It's me, my older sister, and myself. The difference would be, I guess, that my sister and I came here to this country when we were little, like 3 and 5 to be exact.
Wow.
So it was a town where we were the minority in religion and race, and that was different as can be.
I can't imagine.
And I didn't appreciate who I was then. Religion-wise, I did. I'll be honest. But race, it was really hard for me.
Oh, I can't imagine. I can't.
So I wanted to deny it, and it was a struggle because I wasn't happy to be who I was. And I feel horrible saying it now because I don't know if it's because I'm older or because of where I live now or society or meeting more people. Life evolved one way or the other, and now I wouldn't change who I am for the world. But back then it was the worst feeling.
And you had good parents.
Yeah,
great parents.
I had good parents.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was the situation.
Absolutely,
because nobody wants to
yes.
be different. Not to have a different name. Just not even how I looked or my family at home, but just the fact that the other kids didn't understand it.
Yes, very true. That's something that is taught to children through conversation and, healthy families and things like that. So if they come from a family with, where the parents are angry or bigoted or whatever, they'll adapt to that without knowing cause or reason.
Yeah. It is very much the atmosphere, whether it's your parents or, how they're dealing with things. My sister and I, we discuss it now and we say, well, we didn't bring home this issue to even each other. We didn't bring the issue home to our parents because I don't think we even knew it existed, to be honest. It was something we felt, but not something we really thought about.
I agree.
It was just something you dealt with.
Absolutely. And that's why, when you think about the complexity of that, here you are as a child, not even really having the words to identify the feelings or the sociological kind of stuff around you. You don't have those words, especially at 4, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
But you feel different. And that's why I think it's important for parents to sit down and say, how are things going? But children like yourself didn't have the delivery to say, I'm feeling strange.
You don't know why you're feeling strange. You just figure it's just you.
Exactly.
Like, I'm just a weird, shy kid. I don't know how to deal with this. And for me, that was the issue.
Yes, and I was listening to Heather today, who's our director, leaving. But she told this story, and I like this story, and it reminded me of families. So she said this young woman gets married, and she calls up her mother, and she said, how do you make a lamb leg? And the mother said, well, you cut the heel off, and you blah, 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 blah. And she said, well, why do you do that? And she said, well, because my mother did it.
Yeah.
So the mother calls the grandmother, and then says to the grandmother, why did you cut the heel off of it? And she said, because my mother did it.
Right.
So they finally get hold of the great-grandmother and said, why do you cut the heel off? And she said, because it didn't fit in my oven. I love that story. But that's so much like families.
Yes.
For example, families that raise angry children who prejudiced or judgmental, you'll often find that in the parents.
Yeah.
If you ask a child, why are you so angry? Or why don't you like that person? They don't know why.
Right.
So,
which brings on a whole topic about...
Absolutely.
Everything going on today with race and religion.
True.
Yeah.
It's so true. And that's why I think that analogy that story that I just told is important, because I want parents to realize what they're handing down.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that's so important with how you speak around your child. Some parents will say, oh, we never fight around the kids.
I've heard that many times.
but
They know.
it's an essence, it's an environment, it's a feeling.
They know.
The kids are always in tune to your emotion. It's an energy.
Very much so. I have said to parents when they said we don't fight around, like I said to them, they know.
Everybody knows, because even just an atmosphere in a job location where you're working, you can feel an environment. Actually, I went to Trader Joe's, and they're always so friendly and helpful there. And I asked this one guy, and as he was checking me out, I said, "You guys are so friendly and happy all the time. Like, what is it? Is it just the place?" And they said, "Well, they treat us really well." And
Yep.
so I said, "That's why when I go I can just feel how nice the environment is."
It is so true, and I recognize that so I was in private practice for many years, and I'm at my current position. I accepted it because of many private and personal reasons, and that's where I really learned about the work stress in the work world, because I found myself having high motivation for working with and for certain people. The administration changed, and my motivation just slunk, except that I love what I do.
Yeah.
I love being with people, and I'm always motivated for that. But outside of the office, I really felt that, and that's true with a family.
Yeah.
I think if you visit somebody's home that you've never been in before, you can feel it. Is it is it a friendly home? Is it a loving home?
Right.
It doesn't take very long to feel that.
Yeah.
But children know. Children do know.
Children are little sponges to everything they feel, they see. It really significant. And I wanted to talk to you about, since we're bringing out what children feel, how do we feel and sense children? How do we pick up and recognize who's responsible for recognizing when a child is having a mental health issue, whether it's depression, anxiety, or suicidality?
Ideally, it's the community's responsibility. It's everyone, grandparents, extended family. Someone needs to pick up on that. And sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's a school. But, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
So true. It's so true.
That's what I said.
Because you might have a child that is fearful of a parent or a caretaker who might go right by the book at home, but then act out in the classroom. It can happen in many ways. I want to tell you something. Many years ago in the 1990s, we were asked by a local school, high school, to come and talk about suicide. We got there that night, and not one parent showed up. The administration and teachers, it's a small community in the area, asked and sent out questions to parents that they knew, why didn't you come? And the common response was, well, I don't want anybody to think my child's suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need
stigma.
We even put on the flyer, your child's friend. It could be anybody, just to be aware that when somebody's struggling. But the stigma back then, that was almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, was a huge stigma then.
Huge stigma. What I am hoping for in the present moment is that we turn that around and that we talk about suicide.
Yeah.
There was an old adage that just went on for years, and that was, if you mention suicide, it could happen.
Right.
It's when you don't mention it.
Yes.
That you have to worry. So about 3 years ago, we planted a tree out behind where we work. It says "Stop Suicide." And we had all these people come who had members of their family commit suicide, and they had tiles, and they could write whatever they want if the family approved of it. But the person who completed suicide would walk up and put this tile around the tree. And we had over 100 people there in this small area, over 100.
Yeah, in a small community.
Absolutely. So it was the most beautiful fall day, and it was just so mind-boggling to see all these families there, many of which were teenagers and young people.
That brings me to a point that could be any age. In my residency program, they helicoptered in a child from another town, who had committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. He was 12 years old. And the parents had decided to... He was pronounced dead, but I guess they kept him on enough life support or resuscitative equipment.
Right.
They had him on enough equipment to keep his organs fresh because the parents wanted to
Donating.
donate the organs. I actually walked by his room because I came in for being on call in the ICU that night, and I walked by his room and there was a dead 12-year-old. What makes a 12-year-old feel this way? And of course the parents, I don't know them, I never spoke to them, but I could imagine they're going to be feeling guilty
for the rest of their lives.
But what do we have to do to see or recognize? Because it's not necessarily even a sad child. Because
Right.
look at the adults that we know. I say, Kate Spade has the most colorful, fun. She's the fashion designer.
Yeah, I don't know.
She
her.
had. When you look at all these cell phone covers and handbags, they're bright and pretty, and she committed suicide. And when I see hers in the store, people still buy her things because they're fun. They make you feel good. They didn't make her feel good. There was something missing, and I don't know her inner life, but Robin Williams. It was a comic.
My, yes.
So Anthony Bourdain, he seemed to have such a full life,
yes,
traveling.
Yes.
So, and these are adults, but we're all people, so that's why I'm just mentioning. What do you do to recognize
I
this?
think it's important now. One of the things, there's a group that's, I don't know if it's nationwide, it's throughout New York State, and it's called SOLOS, Survivors of Loved One Suicide. We have a SOLOS group here in the area, and I've been a part of that because I wanted to know more. And I felt it was so important to talk about it. So this group comes together. They've had family members or friends that have ended their life, and they come to talk about it. The person who runs the group happens to be a dear friend of mine, and his son, 14 years old, shot and killed himself. So it felt like this taboo thing that therapists are so fearful of. When you first start out, you think, what if they end their lives and they're seeing me or whatever? There's several things I've learned from my experience and from the SOLOS group. First of all, suicide is seldom about one thing. For example, a man's wife walks out on him and leaves him for another man. Well, that happens pretty much every day in this world.
Yeah.
Yet someone might end their life. It's not over their wife walking out.
Yeah.
It's over their inability to overcome that. So oftentimes, you might have sort of a heavy-duty father who's heavy-handed, and that happens every day. Every once in a while, you'll have a child end their life. It's not over that one thing. I think we have to be, again, it's got to be the community. As I said, 30 years ago, suicide had such a stigma that these poor families struggled for the rest of their lives with this. It was my fault. I wasn't a good parent.
Right.
That's not true.
Right.
It's just not true. It can be in certain cases, but that's not. We have, unfortunately, so many children coming from dysfunctional homes. They don't all take their lives.
Yeah.
When I talk about self-confidence and esteem, I think that's very important. There's some of us in the SOLOS group that feels that suicide is a form of mental illness in the sense of that it's not mental health, but that there's something that tells that person it becomes an option. And one of the things we also know is that many, many people, once they've made that decision to end their life, become joyful. They'll say, we've heard many stories, the weeks before he was such a good mood and he was generous and, giving things away and say, here, I want you to have this.
Yeah.
And everybody thought that, he was or she was in such a good place. It's because they had made a decision of how to stop the pain.
That's a red flag.
That can be a red flag. It can be a huge red flag. I once, when I was working in an emergency room, I had a gentleman come in. He was an older man. I went in to do the assessment. He said he had no idea his children were mad at him, so they called the police to come and bring him in. They're claiming I'm suicidal. I'm not. He was very talkative, and I thought, well, geez, I wonder what's going on. In the ER, there's no HIPAA. We have a right to call anybody to back up that statement that the person is safe. He had emptied all of his bank accounts. He had given all of his money away, all his possessions away. He was sitting in his living room with a shotgun when his son got in, and he was going to end his life. But he sat there and said, oh, no, I would never do that.
Yeah.
And he would have done it. Sometimes, family intervenes and it saves them. I don't know if the gentleman's still alive or not. But there's all different stories that are attached to suicide. We had a good family friend who ended his life. He had a brain tumor and he was in pain. God bless him.
Yeah.
I didn't blame him for that. But suicide is something that we have to start saying is a reality, and we don't have to wear a t-shirt with it on.
Yeah.
But we have to be okay, comfortable talking about it and saying to children, have you ever thought about hurting yourself in any way?
Yeah.
And you talk.
Yeah.
You talk and you listen. Some parents are terrified of that term and would never ever mention it.
Right.
But it's okay to say, are you okay?
I think more parents are becoming comfortable with it, which
Me
is
too.
a good thing, because that helps other parents and that encourages other parents.
Me too, and that's why we had 30 years ago, we had this
Yeah.
meeting at the school to talk to parents about, because there had been a child recently who had ended his life, but not one parent came.
And
Again,
now I
I think
wonder
that-
what it would be like today.
I do too, because when we planted the tree, we had 100
Yeah,
family members
exactly.
there.
Yeah.
And I think Solos is responsible for that. Yeah, the old saying is, if I bring it up, then it'll happen. It's just not true. It's when you
Right.
don't bring it up. And you see
Denial.
your child struggling,
Yeah.
or
yeah.
something's going on, or when maybe one of their friends say to you,
Yeah.
he's not acting right, or a teacher says to you, he's
Yeah.
different.
And like you said, sometimes it's that happier mood.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it is the anger, it's
And-
irritability, or who you think is a bad kid.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe they're actually a depressed or sad kid.
We have found, and it's not always true, everybody's different, but for the most part, we have found that young boys, teenage boys that are truly depressed tend to act very angry. They'll get in fights. They'll slam things around. They'll, put a hole in the wall with their fist or whatever, and it's really depression.
I'm thinking as you're saying this because I actually have a set of twins. They're both 10 or 11, and they have a very dysfunctional family background. They have divorced mothers.
Mhm.
I think there's some manipulation there. There's a lot of anger between the mothers with the custody and everything
Mhm.
going on. So the daughter is constantly teary. She's sad. She's snappy with the mothers, but with me, she's very quiet. She's very subdued. She's sad. The boy, the son, he's more has the attitude problem.
Yep.
He speaks more, but he also speaks in overconfident, like overcompensating for something going on underneath there that's brewing.
Right,
Neither of them are happy,
right.
but they both have a different way of approaching it. One very sad and one overly attacking, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
So that could be anger. He's not a teenager yet. This brings up to the way that their mental health is being handled. Neither of them really want to talk to a counselor very much. They kind of antagonize all the counselors. The girl seems like she could lose it at any day with her behavior. Her depression could potentially lead to suicide.
Mhm.
And until she's actually there, she won't get accepted to be admitted long term in an
Mhm.
inpatient. So why is that the reality? And how can we help these kids more ahead of time instead of being on the brink of what they call a crisis?
Yes, and you're absolutely right about all of it. And these are some of the kids that'll say, I'm not going.
Yeah.
I'm not going. And these are the kids that parents drag into your offices.
Yeah.
They fix them and they're
Yeah.
just not going to have any of it. Under those circumstances, I would probably do a family meeting, or at least meet with the parents without the children and say, look, this is what I'm seeing. We've all got to get on the same page here. And so often those children, again, won't engage in therapy because it's what they should do. So I have laid it out for parents occasionally that, the parents that are divided homes and fighting with each other and they're saying nasty things about each other.
Yeah.
I've sat down with them and said to them, this is what's happening to your children. And I've put it, I don't yell, but
Yeah.
I use pretty strong
Right,
language
right. You
about
have
it because this has got to stop.
Yes, you have to.
Yes, and I think it's interesting the scenario you just laid out because it's so true. Not always, but young girls tend to sort of implode
Yeah.
and
yes,
young boys
implode.
explode. So I've got this child, he's 19 years old. I've got this young boy that I'm working with now, and this is typical. So he's 19 years old. When he was, 11, 12, 13 years old, his mother just left and she moved to the Carolinas. What he didn't understand was that his father had come out of the closet, so to speak, and was a gay man.
Yeah.
So mom left, but he hasn't told any of this. So when he comes into my office and he was having some anxiety, and so when I do a history, I start talking, I ask him about it, and he said, "Oh, I don't care. I don't care. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. Why do I care?"
Right.
And yet he's constantly getting in fights and having problems. "I don't care. How did you feel when your mother left?" "I don't care. Good for her."
Right.
And this kid is just hurting so bad.
Yeah.
And finally, as we sort of peel the onion and work it through, he started, after meeting with him quite a while, he just sat down and bawled his eyes out.
Oh.
That is, if he was better.
Well, that's phenomenal that you actually were
That-
able to peel that onion
It
enough
doesn't
to
always
cry.
happen. It doesn't always.
Right.
That was like a win-win,
Right.
because he said to me, if I was better, she wouldn't have left.
Right, of course he's
And-
going to feel that
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. And that, he wasn't mad at his father. His father eventually moved same-sex partner in the house. And I said, "Well, how do you feel about that?" "I don't care." And it's not the same sex that he minds. It's the fact that his mother left. And it's
Right.
not his mother and his
Right.
father in the house.
Right,
But nobody sat down to talk to him.
right.
Nobody explained to him. So we have a great relationship. But that, believe me, as you know, does not always happen.
Yeah, you
And-
need to take the time and use the right words.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With recognizing, I guess the main thing is we all have to be on high alert.
Yes.
Pay attention to kids. If you are around kids, pay attention to them.
Maybe this is very old-fashioned for who's going to hear this, but I strongly believe that a huge hindrance to that whole process is technology.
It's
I was in
actually
the
very true.
I was in the grocery store the other day, and this woman had 2 children. They were maybe 3, 4, 5. They were in this little wagon. And she's walking, talking on the phone, and the one kid's going to fall out of the thing. He's like trying to get up, and I was like, "Excuse me,
Yeah.
your child is going to fall."
Yeah,
And I thought, put the phone down.
put the phone down, pay attention to your child, make eye contact. Your child's going to do the same thing and stare at phones all day and not even realize how that's deteriorating their brain.
Exactly.
That's making them feel physically in pain, mentally just deteriorating.
You're emotionally unavailable for that child.
Yes.
Now, I have seen, I assume parents or whoever the adult is, with a child in their car at the grocery store and talking to them.
Yeah.
That could be like the dinner table.
Yeah, yes.
How was your day today in school?
Sometimes doing chores, running errands can be your together time with your child. Running to the grocery store.
Absolutely.
Actually, the technology issue is pretty major. I wanted to bring up, there's a psychologist. She's a clinical psychologist from San Diego State University. I don't know if you've heard of Jean, I don't know if it's Twenge or Twenge, Twenge.
No, I have not.
So she has published hundreds of papers and she's written books, and she has a website, www.jeantwenge.com. So her full name, www.jeantwenge.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can find her on Psychology Today, which is a great website for mental health resources. And she has talks. She did a TED Talk too, where she was talking about the studies that she's conducted, watching the mental health deterioration over the years, ever since smartphones became a much bigger part of our lives, the lives of teenagers in particular. So she has really interesting resources that I wanted parents and providers alike to kind of get out there and start looking at and reading. And she speaks really well, so she's easy to follow.
I would love to get that information, and I'll get that from you, because that's very interesting.
Absolutely.
And I'm fascinated with that subject matter because it's just so rampant, and it's like a cancer. I mean, I see children and parents in a restaurant and they're all on their phone. And it makes me so sad.
It is sad. They're addicting. These devices are addicting.
Absolutely. And again, you cannot emotionally be there for your child when you're staring at a phone and texting and not looking at them.
Exactly. And there's so many aspects to that too, of children with the cyberbullying. And I think that's how that whole premise of that show on Netflix started, 13 Reasons.
Yes. I didn't see it yet. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I watched all but the very last show because I watched every episode, and then the very last one I didn't watch. Because I just didn't want to see what was going to happen, because I knew what was going to happen. I didn't want to watch it because I had become very emotionally connected to the
Absolutely,
characters.
absolutely.
It's good to watch. I think you have to have a little bit of a strong gut to watch it. I'm not sure if it's helpful for teenagers or harmful. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Mhm.
It does give teenagers ideas because it does kind of glamorize the suicide and you're going to pay for what you did sort of aspect.
Yeah.
So it's a little blamey, if that's a word, as opposed
like
to,
it.
yeah. I don't know if it helps too much on what a child can do to strengthen their own mental health. Like you said, it's not one thing that causes the suicide. It's many things that lead to it. And what I liked about it is the point we're making today that it's everybody's responsibility. That's why there's 13 reasons, 13 people she could blame or that contributed to what led to her taking her life.
Mhm.
However, on the flip side, it kind of gives you that, well, if you all do this to me, you're going to be punished for the rest of your lives because I'm just going to end my life and you'll have to live with that. That's not the point of it, but if you're a teenager, you might feel like that's the point of it.
Mhm.
But I think what we need to do is prevent that kind of idea of, well, this is the solution then. It's not a solution because
Yeah.
everybody missed her. It also led to the whole detriment of the entire school, and that's why there's more than one season. One thing led to another. And so losing a teenager just destroys an entire community,
Mhm, mhm.
especially parents and loved ones. You know,
Exactly. Well, I would not want my child having that kind of experience from a television.
Right,
I would want that child to have that experience with me.
right.
So that there's questions and there's answers. There's that back and forth rather than sitting and watching something. So I think it has to
Right.
be an ongoing conversation, including the child.
And I think that's the point of a show like this because there's many shows and articles and there's a lot more talk about suicide. The point of it was to get help. So there's like a helpline. And there's also, don't be a bully, don't be mean, and pay attention. So that's to teach the rest of us what we should be doing. But I think what we're talking about is how to cope for yourself,
Mhm.
to handle things better, and to recognize things better too.
I mentioned the Solos group again because they're very active. You can go on the computer and put Solos in there and get some information, and they are a wonderful, wonderful source for ongoing groups or counseling or hooking you up with someone in your community that can support you during this time.
Yes.
And I like their theme because their theme is it's not about blame and that parents shouldn't have to suffer. Going back to one of the solo groups I was in, a wife and a husband came in, parents of a young girl who had taken her life. And they had said they had talked to her. She had been on the phone with her therapist. They had talked to her before she went to bed that night. She was just in a wonderful place. And, oh, Daddy, I love my job. And she took her life that night. My point is that's why it's important to have these places to reach out to.
Yeah.
To prevent it at times, to help prevent it or to know what to do or what to do afterwards.
I think I do like the idea of hotlines.
Yes.
Like there's crisis hotlines. There's, if you know about this one, the crisis texting, it's hello 741-741.
No.
So
you have great
can
resources.
text. I think if people know, especially kids and teenagers, that they can just text someone because that's what they do.
Absolutely.
So if you're feeling down and you don't want to go and find someone or really verbalize, texting is great. Texting a person that doesn't know you, won't judge you, won't tell anybody because they just don't know who you are. Just text a friend. You're feeling low. Text this unknown friend.
Absolutely.
So that's hello, HELLO, to 741-741.
Again, I would say please, please, please care. Please. It's very heartfelt. I have a very close personal friend who ended his life, and I would have said the same thing about him, that he was, in fact, when they told me, I had just been with him a couple of days before that and didn't see anything, but a family member did and ignored it. Yeah, please care.
Please care and don't ignore it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other things I was thinking about with parents who are overwhelmed, and dealing with children who then get overwhelmed or stressed. Just remembering that as the parent or as the caregiver to give yourself breaks because you can't take care of somebody without taking care of yourself first because you don't have the fuel, the energy, the resources within yourself. So give yourself breaks.
I often refer to it as getting in your car and putting it in neutral and flooring it. Eventually, you're going to run out of gas.
Yes.
And you're not going to get anywhere.
Yes.
And I also have said to parents, and shocked some parents, that you have to be number one to yourself, because if you're not healthy, if your mood isn't stable, you're handing that down to your child. So the most unselfish thing you can do is take care of you, so you can be the best for them.
And that goes back to them absorbing what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's not unusual to see a parent who, let's say, for example, maybe is not eating healthy in a healthy way, and they're overweight. You often see the child do the same thing because they eat together or whatever. It's all about role modeling. You need to be the best that you can be.
Right.
You're that role model to that child so he can be or she can be the best that they can be.
So write a journal, listen to some music, read a book.
Absolutely.
Take the weekend away.
Yes, take time for yourself. I'm going to do this for me. You need to do the same thing. You need to take care of you.
Right, you do. To wrap up, giving some more resources that I could think of. If you have any, shoot them off to us now. If you have anything else, I think NAMI is something. NAMI is a good organization. We have one in the community. So just about every community will have one. And if not, start one. Right. Yeah, it's a nationwide, it's a national alliance for originally it was mental illness. And I don't know if they've changed that. They have a lot of family resources. They are for the family of people with mental illness. Which, it's a burden on you to be dealing with. And also people feel guilty when they say it's a burden. Right. Burden has such a negative connotation. Exactly. So you can change that language and still seek help and support. If you deny that, you're not helping anybody, including the child or yourself. Denial doesn't take it away. It'll explode one day. Absolutely. And it is very, very difficult. I've worked with several parents of children and adolescents that eventually grow into schizophrenia. And it's a very, very, or bipolar. It's just a horror with the autism, but autism isn't a mental health issue. Yeah. It's a terrible thing to watch. It's like a cancer. Yes, like everybody knows someone who has cancer. Yes. Everybody knows someone who's depressed. Absolutely. Absolutely. Another website here for parents that have questions with financial resources or self-care wellness resources, especially during COVID, childrensdefense.org. So there's links to ideas and videos. So it's just childrensdefense.org. childrensdefense.org. I read that. I didn't spell it on the top of my head. It's overwhelming. The resources you had mentioned for suicide. The Solos, it's SOLOS. And it's a wonderful organization, regardless of the situation. It could be a friend of yours, a neighbor that you didn't know well, but, regardless of the situation, to reach out to them. I apologize, I can't remember the contact number, but there's a national number for them. I will get that information to you. They will guide you where to go. Like I said, it could be a neighbor you didn't know very well, but it scared you or disturbed you, or a family member. And, any kind of mental health could lead down that path. So being sad or anxious today could just snowball. Exactly. That's the exact word I was looking for. Absolutely, it can. And I didn't make this up, but I'm going to say it again. Please care. Yeah, exactly. Please. The last thing I wanted to point out was I know that mental health resources are so booked up. There's too much of a need and too little providers and help compared to that need, and you're all very booked up. In the interim, find your child or yourself as the parent or as the group, family, someone to talk to, whether it's even in your church, if it's a family friend, if it's the provider, until you can get in to see that mental health counselor, or if that's just what works for you. I like to talk to my patients one-on-one. I take out extra time just for what I'll call a talk session. It doesn't have to be in the exam room. It can be in my own office where we talk. Yes, I don't have the training to be a social worker or a counselor or a psychologist, but I'm a person.
Absolutely.
And just
and a
talk.
caring person.
Right.
And I don't know how to take a blood pressure or draw blood, but I care. So, oftentimes it's your primary care person that you turn to.
Because they know you.
They know.
Or they don't know you. Or see someone you don't know. Whatever works for you.
Whatever works for you, absolutely. And again, the school, it could be, if your children have friends, have them over.
Right.
See what kind of interaction they're having. Is it a healthy relationship?
Right.
Notice changes. For example, if your son all of a sudden is getting in fights in school and that's not his MO, and all of a sudden there's this fight or this anger, what happened?
Right.
And I have very dear friends that tend to over-respond. So if their son came home and was like, pouty or what's the matter? And they scared the living daylights out of nothing, Ma, nothing. And I said to them, you have to let him tell you. Right. And he's not going to tell you if you react with fear and over-respond.
Yes.
And, what's the matter? What's the matter?
Right.
And I said, stop.
Right. Right.
Because, it was daunting to me. I was like, oh my God, what's the matter?
Right.
Just listen.
Just be natural, listen, and like you said, care.
Care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.